evening, ladies, gentlemen, and MBs, and welcome back for resumed, reconnected, restarted, all the re's, One Drag Priority podcast here from Warui Deshou on Streamer 4. I'm Shadon. Joining me, of course, as always, is the Soul Doctor.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's early to be back, but we're happy to talk. Well, I mean, I guess we're happy to talk more about this show. I mean, I'm happy to talk about it, but am I happy with the show? I don't know. There's a lot of feelings, a lot of
Oh,
things to
God,
get straight.
yeah.
But it's nice to see
Oh,
everybody.
boy.
I hope everybody's Monday has not been too horrific.
Yeah. Mondays are like, the cursed, twisted, child of Satan of the days if they were like a family,
Yes,
It's the one
yes,
that gets locked in the attic and no one speaks about it. We don't talk about Monday.
no.
It's a point of shame for the family. Anyway, we are of course indeed back to cover One Drag a little bit more. We ran out of time last week, so because if you're listening to this on pod, you might be thinking, "Oh, what's going on here?" I need to put some stuff out there for context, firstly, which is it's amazing that one's opinions can fluctuate over the course of a couple of days because I don't quite feel the same now as I did when I was actually doing the pod on
Really,
Friday.
really.
Mildly, it's
About
been
about
mildly.
the whole thing, or just about this part we're going to talk
Uh,
about?
just about this part specifically, which
Okay.
is key to bring up because again, opinions do shift a little bit. It also doesn't help that I actually watched an anime film that, funnily enough, also dabbles in similar territory, although far more ham-handedly than Wonder Egg does, by virtue of also having been made in the 70s, which is a film called They Were 11. I don't know if you've
Oh,
ever heard
so
of it.
good. I love that movie.
It's
It's
a very good film,
yeah.
but if you know anything about the character Frol, you know full well that is messy. And yeah, it's just I only bring that up just to point out that everything that's happened in this episode is like, wow, I just can't like everything. Having watched that film now, I've thought more and more on it because it's just and I do have a lot to talk about here.
Okay,
Okay, so
you should talk about They Were 11 like at length
um
in context of this, just because it might have been 11 years since I've seen that movie. It's been a long ass time. And like I don't
um
remember at the time any like stuff related to what we're talking about. No gender politics, no. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's uh it's just, I guess, been a long time, and maybe I was just thinking about things differently, all those years ago. Um you're being asked to turn up your mic a wee bit. I've got you up
I
pretty
have the,
high.
I've done it. I've just done it.
All right, I've got to turn you down. Okay, keep
Sorry,
talking
that
so
was
I can
from
adjust your
that was from
levels.
college weekend. So yeah, here's the thing, right? I'm not going to dwell on this because I'm not here to talk about They Were 11. I only want to bring it up just by virtue of saying there was stuff in it that just kept me thinking about it. But the character named Thrall in that film is genderless by virtue of having been raised in a society where gender is decided basically for them at
Okay.
a certain point in life. It's very patriarchal.
Hmm.
What is essentially going to happen is if she fails the exam in which the film is centered around, I mean to say,
Right.
um, they uh, they will become a woman by default and married off to a guy who already has 8 wives. So when I said patriarchal, I weren't kidding. So the reason they are doing the exam is so they get the preference of if they pass, they get the preference of becoming whatever gender they wish, and therefore choose to be a man. And um, yeah, it's the
Well,
implementation in the film is
I forgot that.
deeply yeah, the implementation in the film is deeply messy. It's very 1970s sci-fi messy,
It is.
where they were getting it feels like the writers were very experimental with the idea of gender in future societies without considering the implications of how that might read, given that again, this is being written by someone in the modern day. So there is inevitably a little bit of bleed through on one's perspective and opinion. That whole this is a work of fiction and it does
Hmm.
not represent the views of the officers is only applicable in a legal sense. It does not mean jack diddly shit as far as how I can interpret it. But anyway, I get the impression, at least from that film, and I could be wrong on this, that it was not mean spirited. But for one, intent and execution sometimes, like, it doesn't matter what the intent is. If the execution is still offensive, it's still offensive. And two, it was like literally this close to, from my perspective, being surprisingly progressive for its time anyway. But I'm not here to talk about it. We're here to talk about Wonder Egg, so we're going to move on to that. And now is probably as good a time as any for me to just mention that for those of you who may very well, but because the possibility exists, this has to be done. You may very well be listening to this, but not have listened to our very first stream.
Yeah.
And in a way, I actually think that might not be an entirely invalid thing, because this is probably, or not entirely, going to be focused around episode 10, which is worthy of discussion all on its own, of course. So that's not an entirely invalid prospect. But to put it on the table here, here are the content warnings for episode 10 specifically, which is rape, like right out of the gate, there's that. Transphobia and queerphobia as well, and also grooming. Although the grooming element we're probably not going to discuss because we talked about last time that's specific to what's happening with I. So yeah,
but it's good. It's good to bring it up because we tend to be, if this is your first time here, we tend to be verbose, meandering, tangential. So yeah, bring up
tax frauds. You name it.
Well, that's a different dimension. So.
Well, the pod's called Warui Deshou. It's probably bad. Mm-hmm. There you go. We at least commit to the truth in advertising, if nothing else. And then with that out of the way, I'm also going to mention two things that are relevant, or rather one thing, but applies equally to me and Doc, because make no mistake, episode 10 is an episode about trans characters, transphobia, trans identity, and in case it's not clear from the fact that you're watching me on video and thinking, holy crap, this dude looks like, the most average, like, late, like mid-30s, like any tuber prick ever. I am a cishet guy. And so I am going to do my best to talk about this episode without talking authoritatively, as if though I have any, like, actual first-hand knowledge of what it means to be trans, because I don't. I am gonna
not first-hand
do
knowledge.
My best.
We can only have second-hand experience.
Trans people. Let's say I've spoken to trans people. Yeah, I have trans friends in the fan game community, for example. Yep. And of course, Valerie, our podcast host, who is engaged in game development awesomeness and also destroying stuff in Gundam on stream. Unfortunately, she can't really be with us at the moment to discuss this show. But anyway, so I'm going to do my best. Lord knows that this episode has given me a lot of thoughts that I don't even feel very settled on. And that, to me, makes me feel very nervous. I'll be upfront about that, because Lord knows I want to try and be a good ally. But I have said some, like, stupid crap before on the pod, or even just occasionally accidentally misgendered characters. And, like, it happens, and I make no apology. You make every apology. Yeah, I make no excuses for that.
We have this. So, we fucked up before, and we'll fuck up again. That's not an excuse. That's just a expectation setter.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a phrase that I'm fond of, which is, "If we're to be damned, let's be damned for what we are." So there we go. I don't know if I necessarily should be speaking on Doc's behalf about any of this, but that's personally how I feel anyway going into this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I broadly agree with you. I can't think of any. I mean, we certainly both are white cis men, as is very evident, I think, from the portraits on your screen. So like you said, we have a perspective on this that is going to be different, more limited than other folks.
You were saying about us both being, like, white cishet men. Like, I am literally one change on the hair slider away from being the default settings in any BioWare RPG game for character creation. That is how vanilla I look, I swear. And I'm fully conscious of that fact, and fully conscious of how it plays into, my understanding of the world, and various things about, the privilege I've had growing up, relative to other people. The fact that, of course, this episode in particular is very much centered around gendered violence towards trans people. and that's something I've never experienced. But I don't want to refrain from concept because I think that that is
Right.
not right.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the best case scenario we can hope for, Shadon, is that up front we make clear that we're not that we don't have malicious intent when we're trying to explore what's happening in this episode and kind of wrap our arms around it and figure it out. Um, but if when we inevitably do kind of slip up here, or say something wrong because we're ill informed, or you just generally fuck up around like in the ways that people with our limited experience and knowledge about these sort of things can and will fuck up. What we hope for is that folks in our community and folks, in the wider like sphere, the anime sphere that are watching and listening, can educate us. We're not digging our heels in here. We're not thinking that we have the fucking true knowledge. We haven't discovered the stone tablet of queerness and now we know everything about it. We want to be better and we want you all to help us. And so there's going to be like points of view and facets and perspectives of this episode and future stuff that we just like miss or mess up or just don't think about or get wrong. Help us out. Like, we want to learn and we're not, like afraid of that. It's what we would want. But and just, as long as you know that we're trying here, we're making a good faith go, we're not trying to do anyone down, then I think we could we could stand to benefit from trying to suss all this out.
Yeah, the only thing I'm truly afraid of is continuing in ignorance. So definitely do feel free to say. And I would also, again, just reiterate something I said at the start of the other pod, which is, for the love of God, don't let your critical analysis of this work or consumption of any sort of critique end with us. Go seek out LGBTQ plus analyses of this work. Go seek out trans analysis. Go seek out multiple, because I've heard conflicting discussions about this. General mood I've seen from some places is that this episode is an atrocity, and some others say that it's actually good. All I can offer you is my opinion, and I suppose that's probably a good time to end the preamble and actually get down to brass tacks and finally talk about.
There is one more preamble thing I'd like to say, and that is if people are watching this without having watched part 1, I do think it's important for us to say, like, we did reach out to someone, a close friend of ours who's trans, to see if they will be interested in talking about this, because to just platform a trans person here and give them space to talk about the issues presented here and like how they make them feel and how they might make others in the community feel. And they just weren't able to do it. So I just wanted to let that be said in case anyone either missed that the first time or just hasn't listened to the first part, that, we made the attempt probably too late because we didn't. It's like we were gonna record the episode on Friday and I hadn't watched it like by Wednesday, and Shadon messaged me and was like, yo, we should do this. We should reach out.
It was the most serious cover of a Craig David song ever. Watch the episode on a Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to inject some levity here, but no, you're right. And I would also therefore just like to add on to that again, the door doesn't close, the horse doesn't necessarily bolt from the stable once this episode is done. Like, if you have anything to say to us after the facts about how you feel about this episode, I would invite you to do so. You can get to us on Twitter at Warui Deshou, get to me at Shadon1010, you get to Doc at the Soul Doctor. Please feel free to contact us. Right. Okay. We've literally waited days to talk about this episode, so I want to really get into it now. Right. I want to talk about it.
Let's get stuck in, lad.
And so, where to begin, basically? I think a little bit of context is necessary here, which is Momoe encounters a trans boy named Karu in the dream world, basically one of the Wonder Egg kids. And Karu, of course, was originally born as a girl. and was going through the process of like understanding his own identity, and coming to terms that, hey, like I am actually a girl in a sorry, I'm a boy in a girl's body, and so what Karu did was he approached his kendo master for advice, a figure of authority, someone to speak to about these nascent this nascent discovery, and the kendo master.
Piece of
I'm
shit.
not even gonna dance around this shit. He rapes him.
Yeah.
As a means, and I think this is pretty textual, as a means of trying to enforce the understood notion of being a woman. Like when I say understood notion, I mean obviously rape isn't something that just specifically happens to women, but it is something that particularly hack writers in anime tend to feel is often targeted mostly at women, and indeed that's true in real life, of course. But what I mean to say is it feels like something that like men in some way or another jump to as an action like that they feel like either they diminish the impact it has on women, or in the case of the kendo master, they go right into doing it because it is a way of enforcing a message and getting a message across that you are a woman and this is like the power, this is the
Yeah.
relationship that men have with women, and that they are the dominant force.
Yeah, it's sort of like he has these dual feelings of like, on the one hand, I think he's just straight up is attracted to her because of that one part he says like, "You're the cutest girl I've ever seen" or whatever. And then yeah, you're totally right about like, it's an excellent point by you that there's this other level of, well, if you're a boy, how could I do this to you? See, look, you're a lady. Look, I'm doing this. You know, look at what's happening. look at your biology. You're definitely a lady.
Speaking of biology, we need to note as well that as a result of this, Kara becomes pregnant. The ultimate fate of the child is not established.
I think it's heavily implied, though, in my opinion. With my read, I think that when Kaoru takes his own life, you know, he says, "I felt sorry for the baby, but ... and trails off." I think it's like implied that the baby dies as well.
I weren't sure of that. I thought it might have been that Kaoru had an abortion. That was my assumption.
Oh yeah, no, that's sure. I don't think you can discount that.
Because I think if that was the case as well, that would also be a very specifically like gendered thing, like, you know, thing that happens to women as well.
Right.
By the way, if you want my perspective, since we're throwing that in there as well, I am all for abortion in much the same way as I said about like when we discussed euthanasia as a thing that I think people should be allowed to do, provided they have the appropriate support structures in place to help them make what is otherwise an immensely difficult decision. And I will reiterate again from the other pod that the problem with a lot of perspectives on trying to stop these things from happening is that they always seem to operate on the assumption that they are the most simple of choices. Like as if, oh, what do I order from McDonald's today?
I was just I was gonna say McAbortion. Like we were
oh Jesus.
Just we're on the same wavelength that people act like it is that sort of a simple thing.
Yeah, there is no gravity to it.
They're for it, so they must not treat it as seriously as I do.
Yeah, exactly. And what I want to note as well is just as a small side thing, this might be me reading into it too much, but I can't help but also note the fact that this is a kendo master. So someone who is specifically constantly holding a large block of wood shaped as a rod.
Fair.
The like, you know, the like
he's mastered
the masculinity the masculinity on present here on display here is like, there is no subtlety with it if that is the case.
Yes.
And so of course Momoe fights the kendo master monster, and in the end is defeated. This is why I'm glossing over some stuff with Momoe, by the way, about how Momoe has, of course, been having issues with how she presents herself to the world. Like, does she want to present more as a boy or as a girl? Because the episode, of course, opens with Momoe, like, you know, firstly imagining an idealized date, which is very important. I'll get back to that later. But then, of course, goes on a date which falls apart because it turns out that the guy in question was actually gay. And of course, she's a girl, but from her Instagram, her profile, which again is quite important, I'll mention that later, she presents on that as a guy. Whereas when she goes on the date, she of course gets dressed up in a not too dissimilar way to the way I does, actually, which we mentioned in the previous pod
Yeah.
when I goes to Sawaki's fucking masturbationary, fucking art exhibit. Disgusting. Fuck that guy. Oh, that is a man who, if I saw like getting his head like caught between like a car door and the car frame itself, and someone just slamming the door on him, I would go over and say, "Do you want a hand?"
Exactly. You just like also put your hand on the door and be like,
You're
together.
doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong.
You have my axe,
So
etc.
yeah, and so here's the thing, right? Momoe, like, Kaoru hits on her in the dream world. Says like, "Hotties like you and my kind of thing." Like literally the thing. Like he has style. Kaoru has style. And he and her, by the way, I want to know, have really good chemistry as well, which is really cool. It feels like an authentic, like, these two characters literally do have like banter and interactions with each other. But during the fight, like the kendo master is like thinks Momoe is a boy, but Momoe reveals that she's a girl, and then manages to destroy the kendo master. I'm probably again glossing over stuff because I will confess I've not had the chance yet to rewatch this episode since we talked about it on Friday. And what happens therefore afterwards is we of course had established that there was the train station where Momoe sees off all of the people that she has rescued, which again was my point in a previous pod we made about how it seems to be like she's been doing this for a very long time because she's accepted the temporary nature of the people she saves, the almost ethereal way in which they're just there and then go. But Kaoru and her do share an intimate moment before he vanishes. Even saying he's like, "Don't get a boyfriend, I've got a reservation," and then they kiss before he disappears. And Momoe turns to Panic, her animal, and goes, "Shh."
Yeah, she's blushing, which is like
while being scarred.
Such a different reaction than when Haruka made a move on her that we saw.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got the context out of the way, I think, and I probably again glossed over certain lines.
I think you hit most of the outline form, most of the stuff.
There is two other things actually I should note as well, which is that the trans flag is on full display and trans colors, particularly throughout much of those moments with Kaoru. Kaoru, if I recall correctly, the jacket that he wears does have the trans. It's also on one of the posters, which I think features something called Rubens vase. I've no idea what that is.
Oh, so Rubens vase is like how exactly it is applied in psychiatry and what have you. I'm not 1,000% sure, but it is a picture that depending on whether or not you're looking at the black space or the white space, and it is typically in black and white, although the contrasting colors probably can be different. But if you're looking at the lighter space, in the middle, you'll be seeing a vase. But if you focus on the dark space around the edges, you'll be seeing two people whose lips are about to meet. And yeah, just depending on, and you kind of can't hold both images in focus at the same time. Your eyes are either kind of seeing, or your brain is processing like one or the other. As far as again, the application of this image to psychiatry, I'm not 100% sure, but given the episode it's in, is it related to that stuff and being transgender? All signs point to probably.
Yeah, I think that there's no way something like that has been included purely by accident. And so here's the thing, right?
Good job,
I'm going to have things to say. Here's the thing I need to say right now, which is there are elements, I think, of this particular episode that I think are problematic, that I don't think work as well as they should. I've already alluded to what I thought was the one problem, which is that I feared that this was another case of what I think has been described previously as gay tragedy, but I'm going to expand that to just be LGBTQ plus tragedy, where it is a queer character who is sacrificed for the benefit of a cis character. Now, two things before we get into that further. First of which is, I unambiguously like the fact that that Karu is openly trans and the show is not afraid to point that out.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes subtlety be damned. Like, we have the trans flag. It is outright stated by him, and that is an unambiguous win for the show. That is a good thing. I cannot I don't feel any like sense of like, you know, what I need to check. What I need to say though is this: the show is very upfront with Karu being trans, but the question I want to ask you, Doc, is this: is Momoe a trans girl?
So this is a fantastic question because after I watched the episode twice, I felt pretty sure that she was a cis woman. However, uh, upon watching it a third time, specifically thinking about this question and reflecting back on what some of her struggles have been, I don't know. I don't know because she is often like misgendered, which is a thing that happens to trans people in real life, some trans people. And like after sort of being inspired by Karu, she, I'll use your adjective, unambiguously, clear and full-throated declares that she's a woman, and then she emerges from that battle with the kendo master draped in the trans flag, also the trans flag that is Kaoru's jacket.
Yep.
So I think, I mean, I just don't know. You know what I mean? I'm unsure. What do you think?
I don't think. Look, well, okay. I say I don't think. There we go. We're done. Bye bye. I don't think. I'm a brainless twerp. So okay, no. Here's the thing. I absolutely want, and I do ultimately believe that she is trans for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
The first of which is if she is a trans girl, who was born a boy but has become a girl, or is in the process of doing so, that eliminates my criticism that this is a trans person's story being sacrificed for the benefit of a cis person. Because I remember saying, like, for example, how in Banana Fish, like, people complain that, you know, that was a gay tragedy story where, you know, these two characters meet and they don't get to have their happy ending.
Sure.
And the thing is, I personally didn't feel that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that that makes it my feelings on that the law of the land when it comes to Banana Fish. Especially given, again, much is the same way that, you know, I can't authoritatively comment on the trans issues in this episode. I can't also comment on, you know, like authoritatively on the queer elements of Banana Fish. I can talk about them. But here's the thing, right? So that's firstly my point, which is I think that I do absolutely think that she is trans, because otherwise I don't feel comfortable, like, with the implication, therefore, that, oh, Karu died, narratively speaking, to educate her on her own identity.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think if you look at it in the way that she is trans person, which I'm going with, that's why I'm committing to here, then I think that it's actually a really powerful acknowledgement of how oftentimes, like, you know, the strength of, like, you know, queer identity has been built upon the previous generation's hardships and suffering, in a sense. I recently watched a film called Pride, which was about it was actually a semi, like, I think it was a biopic, if you want to call it that, or something.
Sure.
Basically, it was a retelling of a story of an LGBTQ plus group of people from London who were supporting a bunch of striking miners in England in Thatcher's, like, late 80s Britain. And what at the time, of course, like, you know, LGBTQ plus people were, like, you know, discriminated against significantly, even though I believe at that point some amount of legal equality was established. I don't think it was possible for them to marry still at that point, which is bullshit. But, you know, and what happened is, of course, by these two embattled communities coming together, they both benefit from each other's strength and support, even though on the face of it, miners, you know, ultra masculine conservative men, mostly, and their wives versus LGBT plus people. You wouldn't think these two people would come together.
Intersectionality, baby.
Yes, yes. But unfortunately, some of the characters in the story do, like, because of, for example, ignorance about the AIDS crisis at
Class
the time.
bonding.
One of the characters has suffered as a result of that. And so I think that if that's the case, then I like this a meta acknowledgement that it is regrettably built upon the sadness and tragedy of previous generations, which should never have been allowed to happen. Because were it up to me, and I certainly think it's a lot of fan artists, given what I've seen, feel the same way, Karu and Momoe would be going off into the sunset. They still have their moment. They still have their little victory, which is good.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think we would all agree that we'd want to see them like permanently be a thing, like where they, not even necessarily where we need to see like where the relationship goes, just that there's the possibility of it, rather than Karu just disappearing at the end. And who knows, maybe maybe the story allows for that at the end. Maybe that's the happy ending Momoe gets, because it is, after all, you know, a fictional, magical, like separate world where the rules can be wherever they need to be to make the story happen. So yeah, my ultimate interpretation, she is trans, but I do think to myself that maybe the same amount of, like, you know, unambiguity that is afforded to Kaoru could in turn have been afforded to her. But that being said, as Tofu92 in chat notes, the cinematic language, such as we noted about the trans flag being on the jacket, is unambiguous.
Yeah.
Part of me feels maybe that, because I do agree,
pulls off her boy uniform and
yeah,
was like, look.
yeah, the binder she's wearing also has the trans flag on as well. And I absolutely 100% agree. And maybe this is just me demanding that it be said loud and clear in much the same way. But then again, you've also unfortunately got shitheads on the internet who are complaining, well, she can't be trans, because, like, fuck off, shut the fuck up.
What's the argument?
I don't know.
Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we shouldn't give it oxygen. I would just be maybe
No.
I'll look it up off stream just to see what the rationale is. But yeah. So I think one of the reasons I was more unsure about it was, wasn't there a scene in one of Momoe's early episodes where she's kind of chronicling what happened between her and Haruka, and they're in some sort of like girls' locker room type situation? And this is, of course, not to say that she doesn't belong there, but like my thoughts on like society being ready for trans people to be in girls' locker rooms, especially like when it comes to like high school kids. I just was like, you know, well, but I guess the thing was, I don't know. I think maybe, I don't know, maybe just set that to one side and think to myself, like, okay, like, she had, like, that was fine. She had that handled. But, like, if the thing was, is like, I don't know, I guess she wasn't sure. So what do you think her specific issue was here? Like, because I guess it doesn't matter super much, but like, just to like wrap my head around and get some clarity. So was she sort of kind of closeted, struggling with whether or not she wanted to come out? Or was she like, you know, I don't want to declare either way what I guess I'm not sure, because I don't know. There were times in the show where she was like, it seemed like she would tell people she was a lady. Like, and other people knew she was, I don't know. I guess like, but part of what made all this kind of confusing for me was when she revealed, well, it's not a revelation, but like when she declared in that big fight with the Kendo Tengu man, I'm a girl, you know, I think just like, I was like, yeah, like, definitely. That was never in doubt for me. You know what I mean? So, not that everything has to be categorized and labeled 100%, but I think I'm just kind of talking out the fact that what made this, if Momo is indeed a trans character, kind of what made her arc and her overcoming of certain obstacles and everything. It made it all kind of muddy because there wasn't like signposted in the beginning that she had this issue that she was trying to overcome. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The issue, the way
she
I
goes to a girls'
understand it,
school, right? Maybe,
the
maybe not.
the way I understood it is this, and this I think ties into her dreaming of the ideal date, which is this. And I again, God, this is me talking as someone with no fashion sense or general regard for what is conventional attractiveness. But the thing about this idealized date, and it's very important to note that the person in there, is we don't know who they are, so this could be anyone because it's a dream. But like this goes through what are like very stereotypical nice date things. Like we go to the cinema and we hold hands and all that. I think there's a scene of her and him like chatting and stuff like that. Basically, it's very much like this would be a dream date for me. And by the way, I totally sympathize with that sentiment. Like, I don't think it's unreasonable for someone who's truly invested in meeting someone to like go, hey, I want it to go as well as it can do, and here's the things I'd like. I can see there's little moments playing out. Now that obviously doesn't come into play. But I think that one also has to then look at the fact that the date that's presented there is a very conventional one by narrative design in the show. It is what people expect a date to be like. You go to the cinema, you go and hold that. Like this is very traditional date stuff, if you know what I mean. So that's a societal expectation.
Right.
And then I want to note the difference between how Momoe dresses on her Instagram versus how she dresses for the date.
Can we see her Instagram? Again, can we be shared the Instagram of Momoe by the show so that we can subscribe?
All I'm going to say is that after what happened to Panic, I think that that account.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's going to be she's going to ghost everyone.
That's a hiatus thing. That
yeah. Poor Panic.
But yeah, Jesus. Anyway, so on her Instagram, we don't. Again, I actually think this might have also been to the benefit of the because there's a social media aspect that's not explored here that could be interesting its own way. But the show's juggling enough balls as it is already that I don't feel like it should really have delved into that. Although I'm also going to argue that Momoe and Karu could very well have had their own show entirely. Like, imagine if they were completely divorced from the Wonder Egg stuff and it was just them two. That would be great. That would be really good.
I smell a spin-off manga.
Yeah, that would be like a variation on Bloom Into You a little bit, perhaps even. But anyway. So on Instagram, when Momoe's like shares photographs of herself, she's dressed up in the boy's outfit we've seen her dress as numerous times. By the way, for context, in her wardrobe, she has mostly boys' outfits, one girl's outfit. And as noted as well, Momoe goes to our girls' school, so she does wear a girl's outfit. She doesn't wear a boy's outfit at the school. Presumably one simply doesn't exist.
Right.
And that's an authority thing, of course. Like, hey, you can't wear a non-standard uniform, etc., etc.
But she's got some level of discomfort with her gender identity, with her presentation. Like, she's unresolved about it in some way.
Yes. Yeah.
Until this episode.
And so when she goes on the date, she gets all dressed up. She wears a lot like a proper dress. She puts on makeup from my memory, so she's wearing like nice shoes,
fancy things in her hair. Yeah.
Again, very standard, very traditional idea of what a date should constitute, which is I get properly dressed up for it. By the way, I'm not knocking that off, the value of that off entirely, because I do think, of course, it's not unreasonable to want to put in effort. But bear in mind, on what line do you drive your effort towards here? Are you meeting the standard that you think the other person would be happy with, or are you meeting something that wider society thinks is socially or culturally acceptable for the way women dress on dates? That kind of thing, I'm spinning my hands here just a little bit. I don't know why. But it turns out, of course, the chap who comes along for the date is a guy. He's a guy who is gay. Now, there's two things I want to know about this. The first of which is, much as I said about how we could get a whole show out of Karu and Momoe doing their own thing, the social media aspect also here treads into parasocial relationship elements, which this episode doesn't explore because, again, no time for it. But I wonder if it could have done it if this is the thing I'm getting as we get towards Wonder Egg's end. I feel like it could have had a second season to fully cover everything. This show is tackling so much. Part of me wishes that some areas it could go into were given their own episodes. Like there's so much more that's undiscovered territory for the show, which is not a criticism of the show as such, but more just, man, there's so much here we could tackle, but we just don't have the time because anime has to be made in a system, bro.
Exactly.
God.
It's a product. Consumer
The
product.
other thing I will note, and this is not a criticism I force of myself. This is from Vestnet. Sorry.
Okay, before we get too far away from something you said, I would, if it's okay, am I cutting off like your thought midstream here? Because I wanted to respond to something you had said.
I want to get a very quick thing out of the way. And
go
then
ahead. Go right ahead.
We'll talk. Which is, I just also want to mention something that Vestnet mentioned on their review of Wonder Egg episode 10, which is, it's a bit odd that it is a gay person who ends up like disappointing Momoe, because typically for people who are trans or struggling with their own identity or gender, it is LGBTQ plus people that tend to be the most helpful. That again is not my own criticism. I will not pretend that is mine. That is Vestnet's on their review on ANN. I would very highly recommend you check it out. But it is very much worth bringing up here. That feels like a slight misstep.
But it was it ended up being a trans person who was super helpful to her in the end.
Yes. But you've also got to know, like, in the short time frames, we have to give additional weight to the characters that the show does choose to bring along. Their attributes. So it just seems counterintuitive that we have, like, I do agree that of the sum, like, way, if you went to like turn this into a numbers game, Karu's involvement vastly outweighs the negative element of this unspecified gay man. But nonetheless, it is still there and worth noting.
But is it negative? I mean, I mean, it's okay. I can, I can see you saying, just as just me providing a counter perspective. I don't even know if I disagree with what Vestnet is saying here, but like, imagine how to put this exactly. I can imagine, I can see if you're saying, hey, like, gay person, like, I don't know. I guess I don't see the issue, because it's not like this guy is saying, I'm into ladies, but only cis ladies, which is, I think a problematic position. But he likes, men. It doesn't say, he doesn't specify, trans or cis. He just is into men, and she's not that. And it was a case of mistaken identity on his part. He misgendered her. Now her profile, I mean, I don't know if what her profile was like or whatever, but like, I guess I don't, maybe I'm just not seeing what the problem is there. I think I totally understand why it crushed Momoe. I mean, that would just be terrible. That would suck. So in chat we have a user saying, I think it hurts because the other explicit gay representation is Haruka, who, she's a complicated character, but her deal falls under the predatory lesbian trope, which definitely I have thought as well. I get that. So I guess, the knock here is that we don't have any gay cis representation that feels positive and feels like pro LGBTQ plus all the way across the board. And I get that. I do. Like, that's a shame. But I don't know. Yeah, I totally get it. I guess, like, me falling where I do on the spectrum, I just look at it analytically and I'm like, okay, like, these are his, to me, unproblematic preferences. So, it's painful for the character undergoing that experience, but but that I guess that just that happens and it's shit. But I don't know. It doesn't strike me as a fault of the story on its own. But I mean, now thinking about it more, like I do totally see the criticism of zooming out over the whole of the story and saying like, well, maybe characters that are gay and lesbian are like, maybe it's not great that they're all sort of negatively impacting the characters in some way. That could be something that you would want to address as the author of the show for sure. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, Shadon. That's an interesting criticism here.
Yeah, and thanks to Vesta, of course, who again, not my original observation. Just wanted to point out that I read it, but I thought it was worth bringing up. Steve,
yeah,
you had something else you wanted to say that you wanted to respond to?
Yes. Okay. This is again sort of counterpointing, or just I guess offering a different way to think about the episode. Something that you said, about like Karu is sacrificed as a character to further Momoe's story. So you said Momoe being trans sidesteps that criticism. And I actually think that there's a sort of a way that's satisfying to me to look at the story that the issue of like Momoe's identity doesn't matter in terms of whether or not, like, in terms of Kaoru's ultimate fate. That if Momoe had turned out to be cis, that Kaoru poofing out of existence is still okay with me if I look at the show in this way.
As a narrative thing, yeah.
Yeah. Like, so, the egg world, this dream space, a space where, like, we're exploring, characters are exploring their feelings and dealing with, like, these, like, surreal monsters and hyper real venues and everything like that feels. I don't know. It feels like, and it's not just Haruka, or not Haruka, Kaoru that's there. There's a lot of young women that float in and out of the lives of these other people, almost as if it's like this online space, and they're constantly like crashing into other people, having conflict, figuring it out, discussing issues, meeting with them, talking with them, being vulnerable with them, and then pulling apart. I mean, that's happening for a whole ton of characters. So I guess, like, to me, it's not the wildest thing to think about, like, if a person was struggling with gender identity issues and, somehow put their feelings out into the world, or was even just present in an online space, be it Discord or Twitter or whatever, and then someone else, a trans person, say, shares something that helps the original person we're talking about, but then they go away, they're not online, or they don't interact anymore. I don't know, like, I think that is maybe kind of true to life, and you don't have to think about it in an online context. Like, that seems, it just seems so inherently plausible to, like, the way we meet other people and kind of how human interaction goes, that, like, because it's not like she's like really, I'm sorry, it's not like Kaoru is really dying. It's just like that the access point for the two is cutting off, because I guess in the world of Wonder Egg he's already dead. But then if you want to be super legal about it, then he died for his own reasons. He didn't die to further anything to do with Momo's plot. It just, he happened to meet Momoe and then helped her, and he was already on his way, and so on his way he went.
But you say, like, he just happened to meet Momoe. That's not true, because of course this is a written story where what happens is ultimately the decision of the writer. So it's not something that just happened by coincidence. It is a deliberate choice for this character to
All
meet
right.
Momo.
Well, sure. Well, I'll just go ahead and say it then. This story would be worse off if Kaoru jumped out of the egg world and was like, I live, I'm the exception, just because I am who I am. Now let's all run away together and have a happy ending. That's not what this is about. It's when you're thinking about these characters being real people, like, God, yes, like I want them to be happy, but like these are characters in a particular narrative that is going for a particular larger goal. And, you know, the reason that these two can't be together, even after having met up, like, is the intentionally written villain of the story, like, who, you know, we've talked about some. Like, so I think it seems like we're like up to this point we're like the show has this certain narrative structure and it is employing it now, and we're like criticizing it for being exactly what it is and has told us it's always going to be. It just seems it seems odd because again, Kaoru doesn't strike me as particularly frigid or anything like that, at least no more than like every other like secondary character that the Wonder Egg ladies meet. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't seem, and I could be totally wrong. And like I said, I'm just working through my view on the episode, but like I just like yeah, I just don't feel that way. I feel like if I don't know, if an exception was made at this point in time in the story, it would just be odd. Now, as you said, if after, you know, at the end, you know, after they've overcome whatever it is that's set before them, you know, perhaps then the option will be open to Momoe and Kaoru. But like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Like, it could be anything, but like, it could also like if you, I don't know, it just seems like what you're saying. Maybe it's not what you're saying, but what I'm reading is like, it would be great if some ad hoc solution was found for this one character that we really like, but that would just be bad writing.
No. The thing is, right, this is something that I've thought of as well, which is you point out like, well, if that's the case for Kaoru, why not for everyone else? And the answer to that is because Kaoru is trans, and because trans representation, the way trans characters are treated currently in general in media, is not on the same level as, you know, characters of like cis women, for example, or cis men. You know, this is again why I mentioned the idea of gay panic, gay tragedy, because the the few narratives that are around characters who are LGBT plus seem to often be defined by tragedy and not positivity. It's getting better, don't get me wrong, but that's why I feel that way about it. It's specifically like
Right.
that. I'm going to lean right into it because of that one. Because like, why is Karu special? Because Karu is trans, and because trans people do not have a fair shake in representation in anything.
No doubt.
To be quite honest.
No doubt. But this, to me, like when you're talking about like the gay tragedy trope, like this is not that. At least, like as I have seen it, this is the trauma and the pain of a trans person being given the same amount of weight and screen time as, you know, cis women characters.
I should just point out again that I was of two minds this, but I am of the opinion that Momoe is trans, and therefore I'm okay with it. So I'm not actually criticizing, like I'm not criticizing the show and saying it is a gay tragedy story. I'm just saying that it could be read that way. Depends how you feel about it.
But I think even if let's pretend Momo's cis, just pretend. I think Kaoru's tale is not gay tragedy. I mean, to me that's not the trope. Like, you know, she's sorry, God, I so apologize for misgendering Kaoru. he is like he's not villainized. Um, it just seems to me to be this exploration of his trauma in the same weight, the same screen time, the same length as is given to all these other characters. Uh, we get to explore their trauma in the same way because this is a show about taking all that stuff very seriously and soberly. So, like, I think it might be a misapplication of the gay tragedy trope to call this that. I just, again, even if we want to say Kaoru's the only trans character in the show, which I think I agree with you, I think Momoe is trans. But if that was not the case, I mean, I just still, and this is my own personal view, by the way. I'm not telling anybody how they should feel about this, especially if they are a trans person. I mean, like, they're entitled to feel however they want to about it, and read it in a way different from me, totally. But yeah, I just don't see, like, I see that there could be other problematic aspects of this episode. But my kind of first reading of it was not that, like, yeah, just that this is that's not what's happening with that trope is not being applied here. I don't know. I'm willing to be like told that I that I'm wrong about this.
But yeah, the reading I lead towards is that Momoe is trans, and therefore, as I say, this is a kind of generational iteration, if you want to call that. I don't know what the specific term is. Basically, how the way has been paved, unfortunately, in a way that should never have had to happen to begin with, but it acknowledges that the history of LGBT people is fraught with pain and trauma and suffering and death, but that it can act as an inspirational source to go forward with. So, yeah, I'm okay with it in that sense, but this now is probably a good time to segue on to another thing that I want to discuss with you with respect to the rules of the egg world.
Can I just before we move off of it? So the barrier gaze trope or the gay tragedy trope. So I was reading over some of it that it seems to be a thing, right? That's like not simply that a character is gay and they die, but that they are that they are denied a happy ending because of their sexuality. And like, I just think that, like, you know, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could technically say it applies, but that applies to every single egg character in the show. So I don't see that they're being singled out in any way, that he's being singled out in any way that's particularly negative. I mean, it seems like he has he's, as a character, he's so fantastic and positive and uplifting and brave and, like, has all these great characteristics that never diminish throughout the whole thing. It's just like again, all these other characters in this story, all the other egg girls, like, they come through the lives of our four main characters and then they leave. And it just, I don't know. Like, I'll do some more reading on it. I want to hear more about this. And hear, because I want to give this a fair shake. The idea that, like, Kaoru dying at all in this anime is a bad thing. Because, I mean, it, like, would you rather Kaoru not be trans? Is it like, and then it's okay for him to die? No. Like, I'm not.
Again, I've already said, though, I'm okay with it. I've said the only reason I would find this problematic is if Moe was cis, but no, I'm taking the reading that she's trans, so I'm not. I'm just mentioning it because obviously people may feel very differently about it. And I felt it was worth acknowledging that as a way I felt initially, and then my viewpoint changed. But that, of course, is just mine. Other people might view it that way. So no, absolutely not. I could not vehemently disagree more with that idea. But one thing I do need to quickly just address, though, is that we need to bear in mind that Karu is dead, and therefore one has to question, is his attitude, his positivity, a result of that now being the Egg being freed from the burden of living? Because certainly a lot of the characters in the show thus far that we've met are aware of the fact that they are passed away, and they feel they can act differently in some respects versus others in which they can't, particularly in relation to their monsters.
But many of them are still very pained. Many of them are in denial.
Yeah.
Many of them are in
Oh, yeah.
anguish still. You know what I mean? Like Kaoru's upbeat attitude seems uniquely his, regardless of whether or not it was like a result of being disembodied. I think disembodied and part of the egg world, yes, but that doesn't necessitate him, like his personality being what it is. You know what I mean? Because like there have been people that were just like his polar opposite, like scared to death, weeping. They've been totally oblivious. The two stalker ladies were totally oblivious. You know what I mean? So I think your personality carries over. It seems to be in some ways.
I'm not so convinced on that, because then one would argue, like, if Karu had recovered so much and was so positive, how come he took his own life? I mean,
you can still be I think you could still have be an extrovert and be upbeat, but also like, end your life, and you know what I mean, in a after a particularly devastating moment or something like that. And it could be a put on. It could be like that's like the armor that he wears. It's hard to say, because like but just go back. I encourage you to go back and watch the other egg people and how they're acting, because they all have their own idiosyncratic personalities. Some of them are the first girl we meet with I can't remember her name, but she's red-haired in school. She's very brave. She's very like upbeat and a leader, but then plenty of the second girl she meets, who's at the evil gym teacher, she is like meek and defers and is still in the throes of like subservience to the gym teacher. And the cult girl is in complete denial outright. And she seems super upbeat, but again, it's just because of her denial.
She's brainwashed.
Yeah. So I think it's I don't think it's like the egg world affects everyone this way. Just all the characters have behaved so differently.
All right. Well, the next thing I was going to mention, though, is we need to now talk about. And actually, before I do, I want to just say I think part of the problem also is because so much of this is not left said. And again, I don't want the show to explain every little thing to me, but I do think that to a certain degree, it needs to have more specificity than it does right now in this particular episode. That I think we can both agree on. But anyway, this actually now leads me wonderfully onto my next point, which is this. Let's talk about the rules. Which is, from what I recall, the Akkas say, did they not say that only girls can come to the egg world as visitors?
That's what I don't remember the specific, because like that's what what's her face thought. That's what Rika thought was the case, right? But I don't know if they confirmed that as a yes, or if they dodged the question, or what.
Well, I think that actually specifically comes up as a point when Momoe is introduced, where
that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Where Rika's this is not boys aren't allowed.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right?
But I don't remember what the Akkas say.
I think that she says that, and the Akkas then points out that Momoe is a girl. Like, boys can't be in, and they're like, no, that's a girl. That's why. I need to go back and watch specifically.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Anyway, that's not specifically what I'm not going to get bogged in the weeds. So why point out this, right? If that rule is stated as true by the Akkas, we have a bit of a knife edge balancing act here on how this affects Momoe and Karu, because, of course, if it is girls only, and this is the rule that the world has set it's just the law of the law of the land. It's not something the Akkas came up with. It's something. It's like how I can say to you that gravity exists, but I have no like involvement in it at all. I can't determine the strength of it, or anything like that. But I can tell you it points out. So that's what I'm trying to say. Are the Akkas observing this fact, or are they determining it?
Right.
And this to me feels very key because if it is actually at least diegetically speaking, a given like natural fact of this egg world that only girls can come here, we then have to ask the question: at what point is Wonder Egg determining at which point Karu is a boy or a girl? Because Karu is a boy, um, he has we don't know, for example, like at what stage he is in his transition. Visually, it seems to be halfway. I don't know. But if depending on how hard and fast you hold these rules to be true, and at what point they stop ceasing to be the Akka's perspective and just more what the writer has written, then the writer is arguably saying that Karu can never be a boy because only girls are allowed in this world, which also therefore means that Momoe. I mean, this is a contradictory thing because if Momoe is therefore trans, Momoe cannot be in this world to begin with because it would be based on her being a boy at birth. Or the alternative being that Momoe is a girl and always has been and is cis. So that to me feels like a deeply problematic element of the law, which I want to believe that it's the Akkas who have decided this arbitrary nature thing, because that would not only make sense, but it would tie into them being the villains of the show, as I understand it. Not Thanatos Butterfly Girl, notwithstanding whatever she ultimately turns out to be. Right. But if they're they have already shown that they are willing to rig the rules of the Wonder Egg game for their own benefit. So it would make sense if it was a rule they solely chose and had nothing to do with like the natural way the world works, or the Wonder Egg world works. And in which case it would then tie them into what happens with the Kendo Master, in that by doing so they are trying to enforce the gender standard on Momoe and Karu. And also, inadvertently, they're also therefore disenfranchising the pain of men in general, as well, as a side note. Now, obviously, this show is not about men's pain. Christ, no. But it's worth knowing as a side point. Because they're forcing a very, very strict gender line definition of who gets to be in this world and who doesn't. And I really hope that gets confirmed textually, because if it doesn't, it can be read that no, the law of the land states that Karu will never be a boy, and that Momoe must, by virtue of that rule, also be cis. Which would be terrible. It would be awful. It would probably ruin the show, to be quite honest.
It would really suck. I mean, yeah, you're right. So I did not think about this episode.
Did you confirm the line, by the way?
Yeah. So
the line that they said.
Yeah. So it does seem like they're. It seems like it's both, because like Nehru says there should be no boys, and Akka and Uraka say yes, boys and girls suicides mean different things. And they're doing their whole like gender bullshit, gender split, like men are goal oriented, women are impulsive, and that kind of thing. So they don't outright say like, yes, no girls or no boys are allowed in this space. They just are like, boys and girls are different in these ways. So I don't know. I don't think that there's anything here though to like how do I say, to like oppose what you're saying. I don't think that there's enough here for someone to like in this scene to come up with this big argument against your interpretation of it.
Yeah, but it still feels very woolly for me to even say that, because I don't know yet.
Well, they do say they start talking about this temptation of death, and this is episode 4, by the way, about like 18 minutes or so in, and they're saying like about the temptation of death. Some may be led astray by the temptation and regret it. So, oh wait, this place exists for those who want to return children like that to life. So don't get hung up on gender. That could be it could be, so like I said, it doesn't feel like they're directly answering the question.
No.
And then Rika's like, yeah, you shouldn't discriminate. And that she gets in a fight with Nehru about it. And then I and Momoe have that scene that we all remember from the episode where I says, "You look like a crying girl," and she's like, "Ah, you think you think I look like a girl? Yay!" So
yeah.
But no, I didn't think about what this episode 10 in terms of all that stuff. I'm so glad you brought it up because, man, like the show could possibly have written itself into a corner on all this.
Well, again, the answer is very obvious. The Akkas are the ones who set the rules,
exactly,
and therefore their reductive look at a view on gender, it ties in with what we've seen with the Kendo master. It ties in with their general surreptitious nature, the fact they're manipulating them.
Yeah.
I mean, also I should note that they are men in and of themselves, even if they are now wood mannequins. I don't know, but this ties back to my main complaint about episode 10, which I said before, which is there is a wonderful moment of what I'm again going to describe as specificity here, where it is very apparent that Karu is trans.
Mm-hmm.
But that specificity should have been brought to the fore for more than just that. Because it feels like as a result of not doing that, it stumbles a little bit.
Okay, so I think you saying that in that way has helped clarify in my mind the objection, because it's not just Karu as trans character that comes and goes away. It's that Karu is in a way that Momoe is not. Karu is directly, textually, obviously, verbally confirming trans. And to have that clarity embodied as a character come in and be taken away, and not have it present elsewhere, I definitely now, yes, I think this has clarified for me and sharpened the issue that people could potentially have with this scene, even if Momoe is trans. Like you said, that specificity, that clarity, yeah, I think that's really well stated, Shadon, and I think that helps put things in perspective a little bit for me.
Fair enough then. I don't really have much else to add about the episode, to be honest. Actually, no, there is one thing I will say, which is not really a criticism or a discussion of the episode, but I want to point out and reiterate something that I've said before that I feel is relevant here.
Okay.
So I'm a dude here looking at this. I'm a cishet guy looking at all this, and I'm talking about this this unclear nature of the world and all that, is potentially problematic. But do you know what? None of what I'm saying matters one iota versus if you yourself as a trans person, or even if you're not trans, and you watch this episode and it gives you strength and reassurance that you are being seen and depicted.
Yeah.
If it's doing that for you, then that makes this episode a win as far as I'm concerned, and I'm in no position to therefore deny you that feeling or tell you you are wrong for thinking that. Conversely, I will also note, though, that the woolly nature of how I feel about this also does not therefore invalidate people who are very firmly against the way that either Karu or Momoe are depicted, or the implications of the world's rules, or anything else for that matter.
Yeah,
so,
I've heard a lot of people say it's super messy, and I haven't read a lot of specifics about it, but I mean, it's so charged and, like you said, upfront and specific that, I mean, I can totally see how someone could, a member of that community, a trans person, could look at this and be like, this makes 1,000 missteps. Yeah.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
So the final thing I'll note is I brought up They Were 11 before.
Uh-huh.
The film featuring Thrall, the character who is genderless, who is being forced to become a woman, and then married into this polygamous relationship with a guy who already has 8 wives, and essentially they will be treated like a possession. And therefore, what they want to do is they want to, pass this test in order to become a man, because that's what passing the test will enable them to do. They will be able to pick, and then that resolves the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm omitting a lot of plot details here and such, but I want to point out that I get the impression, and I could be completely wrong on this, someone could point out that the writer of They Were 11 is actually some sort of like fascist or something like that, or gender essentially. You name it. But I get the impression from the film that it was written not from a place of maliciousness, but rather from a place of ignorance from the period. And also, I think in some sense, I've seen this in other works as well. So even some Arthur C. Clarke ones, particularly The City, what was it called again? This book is literally here. The City and the Stars. And so that's why, I mean, it's 70s sci-fi. I think that it feels experimental, but in the way that they might not have understood the implication of what they were writing. But I don't get the impression in that film that came from a bad place. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
And it's certainly, if people have seen the film and they feel differently than me, then as much as I said about this episode, I am in no place to tell you you're wrong or disagree with you. And I will give this episode the same credence in that I think, given everything we've seen thus far of the show, that it comes from a well-intentioned place, but the execution is the issue. And perhaps not a full consideration of the implications. And if I'm not mistaken, the writer is a cishet dude. I may be misremembering.
I'm pretty sure that's yeah. He's a dude, and I'm 90% sure that he is both of the descriptors that you apply to him.
Yeah. And well, if I can be honest and admit that I am not in a position to properly give authoritative statements on trans LGBTQ plus material because I'm cishet, then I think it's only reasonable for me to say that this gentleman cannot authoritatively give a written piece of fiction on trans LGBTQ plus. They can certainly do very well, and they are certainly trying. But maybe if you're doing this kind of material, you might want to consult with an actual trans author or scholar. I mean, I want to also point out, if you think I'm being unfair to the author here, he has literally had to go on the record, or someone on the show has to go on the record, explaining the gender discussion from the Ackers in episode 4. Do you remember when that happened? He actually had to discuss it out.
What happened?
Right. So, So the author or someone who was writing the show had to go and speak outside of the show to explain in more detail the gender conversation the Ackers were having in episode 4. Oh, do you remember?
I don't remember that happening. Wow, I know. So please inform me. So tell me about this.
I don't remember the specifics. Okay. The point I want to make is this. If you have to say outside of your own written work why you wrote it the way you did, if the work cannot answer that on its own, if it cannot stand with the clarity it needs on this very sensitive subject, then it is a failure. Not a
director's cut.
The show is not a complete failure, I should stress, but that particular thing is a failure.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I'm arguing for specificity here, and also why I think that as well-intentioned as this particular episode, and the whole work, to be fair, it is ultimately very sympathetic to the plight of these young women, and women in general, and women's pain and suffering at the hands of society. I do think that's all there, but you've got to be careful about how you execute on this and how you deliver on exploring that, particularly if you yourself are not part of the in-group that are being explored.
Yeah.
That is my overall final thought on episode 10.
Okay. Well, so my final thoughts are, and I'm going to try to be declarative here because a lot of this I've been exploratory and kind of feeling out my thoughts and bouncing things off you and offering counter perspectives. I think one of the things that this episode gets right, in my view, is Momoe.
Yeah.
I think, upon reflection and our conversation about it and reading chat and things like that, I believe Momoe is trans. She's a trans woman. And
100%.
and her kind of resolution to her gender identity issues that are seem to be portrayed throughout. It seems to me like in a nuanced way. Like they don't ever get really tropey with Momoe. You know what I mean? That she's not like treated as like a joke. Uh it's never it seems that they just have a real delicate touch with her um identity issues, and then they have her like roaring lion, like coming out of the closet fully confirming and like overcoming the self-doubt and like getting past what society would be like expecting of her, and just saying straight up like I am a woman, and then draping herself in the trans flag passed to her by Karu. Like, I don't know. I just think all that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Can
I
I
really,
add
really
one
like
quick?
that.
I want to add one quick note in, which is people might want to respond to me by saying like it would be really weird if she literally stared right at the camera and said like I am trans and all this, you know. To which my rejoinder would be, do you know what they could have done? Again, if time allowed it and we lived in an ideal world where there was no limitation on this, she could have talked about it with the other girls. And that could have been deeply revealing and insightful over their characters as well and how they respond
Well,
to it.
see, well,
It could
that
have been
goes back
uniformly
to,
positive.
yeah. I guess that goes back to what you were saying before, is like that conversation would have opened up this can of worms that they might not have time to like really explore fully.
Yeah.
Whereas like keeping it not subtextual, but confining sort of the signifiers of who she is to like the visual language rather than the dialogue, um sort of does double duty of it lets us know, but
Yeah.
also they don't have to then draw out all the like conversation and like figuring all that stuff out and giving that the weight it would deserve to have if it was an element in the show. um
Yeah.
but yeah, I just think like I really like the way her character has been handled. I just think that it is, and I think it's part of why I wasn't that I was thinking that she was a cis girl for many episodes, that just sort of dressed had that whose gender identity struggles had to do so much with her presentation. This is what my thinking was, because the show wasn't treating her in a way the anime often treats trans people. You know what I mean?
Oh, we've been there. We've been there.
So like I love this. Now and but the Karu stuff, you know, thinking about it in that very clear way that you put it, specificity and clarity, and kind of the light that he brung being taken away, that being a sore point for many viewers is of something that I do definitely understand. And like it makes a ton of sense to me, and I can begrudge no one for having that kind of issue. And then the world mechanics, you know, we will see. I think it would be the cleanest explanation possible to say, you know, the Akkas, this is just their subjective creation.
But dials turned all the way to girls.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah. This is
But it's
just
a dial
their
it's a
exactly.
dial they control specifically.
Yeah, that they are not dealing in truth, but they are just telling either useful bits of the truth, useful to them, or useful lies to the girls, right? And hopefully all that will be uncovered and sussed out. But yeah, like I think on balance, I really like episode 10. I think, you know, Momo's arc kind of me as we're doing this podcast, like it hitting me in waves, like, oh, 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 it's this. Like, I think makes it a much better, stronger episode. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I really dug it, and I mean, I think we talked about the other elements of the episode on Friday. You know,
The actual one thing
the
we didn't
butterfly
get, I didn't get
stuff.
to bring up.
Oh, okay.
The one thing I don't think I mentioned, but I'll reiterate it in case I did, is the only other misstep that this episode makes, apart from what I discussed and how you feel it, is they really, really should have not had the ending immediately follow what happens to Momoe after Panic is fucking eaten. Because the ending is tonal whiplash. It's a really cheery song, and it follows her literally throwing up in the sink and then saying, "I can't sleep." What they should have done is they should have put the ending in first and had everything that happened with the Thanatos girl happen after the end credits. And then the moment the episode closed out
Right. That would have made, yeah.
is when yeah. I mean, this is why I said like about this is a problem I'm going to talk about when we get to our next horror media block, because there's the same issue with an opening section of a show where people have tried to defend that by saying this isn't biphobic, and I'm like, I'm going to argue from a structure standpoint why it is.
Oh.
Get ready for that, motherfuckers.
Okay.
Get ready.
Great.
Get ready for that.
Great.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Super.
But yeah, like structure is important. I think that they really should have done that. Where okay, we move the ending forward and we have that all follow post credits, and then the viewer is not left with tonal whiplash. We are left feeling terrible, disgusted, appalled at what we've seen, but we don't then have this sickly feeling of, oh god, I've just gone through this really nice cheery episode. Like it's really, really ill calculated, and I just see. Well, I say ill calculated. I think it just probably is more of an oversight.
Well, maybe that's maybe the deal is like that. Pulling the rug out from under the character is kind of is the point in some ways, and the viewer. I don't know if this is by design of the Akkas or this other faction. If the butterfly lady is part of another faction, is part of the Thanatos, that group that the Akkas want to fight against with Warriors of Eros. I think like. In terms of like dramatic irony and kind of yanking your audience around a little bit, I don't mind it so much. But I do think that having it after the credits might have even worked better in that regard. Because you could be thinking, boy, what a complete, like this complete episode. So good. And have your guard down even more, only to be sucker punched by evil butterfly girl and panic au gratin or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ.
So terrible, man. This is so awful that happened. It was so disgusting.
Right. Let's go and let's rate the episodes.
Okay. Then. All right. 7 through 10. We have to rate the whole block. Man.
I'm just gonna start throwing darts at a board and let that solve the problem for me. Anyway, I'm gonna give you the unenviable task of deciding first off.
Oh, I mean, well, I think as a block it's very strong. I mean, like I said, I think number 8 is probably the weakest episode of the series so far, but that's as you pointed out in a relative sense. I think it's still quite good. I think the show has continued to do what it does, mostly very well. It's it can be a little messy, but in general, I like that. And I think, it has given me some imagery that will almost unfortunately remain with me, because there's just some really painful shit that this block of episodes shows, and it shows it in just this immaculate way, and it is just so, it's very memorable. And I have to say that this cast of characters, these 4, are really becoming one of the more memorable casts anime that I've watched in quite some time. You know, not
Yeah,
since Eizouken can I think of like a core cast of characters that I just loved so much. And I mean, that's kind of a recent show, but that's like an example. I mean, like, you know, I can't really think of another. I mean, there are some shows who's like, I can remember one or two characters that were very strong, but like, you know, as an ensemble core group, like these four are fantastic, and I think that they've been handled mostly really well, and I am like I'm so excited to see how this thing ends, and this show has kept me excited and engaged, and it has been uh, it has been just audacious, bold, unafraid.
yeah.
And I think though that kind of audacity is bound to leave many viewers sore and upset. And I don't want to come off as saying this as like, oh, I'm the enlightened one. I sit over here and I've not been upset by it, but you plebs, of course you're going to be bothered. I mean, I think that is not the attitude I take. The show has like, you know, I've been affected by it. Obviously not nearly in the same way that, you know, that women, that gay women, that trans women will be affected by watching something like this. So, I mean, I don't know, all that to say, I just still think the show remains really strong. So, I'm going to give it 4.5 degrees of latent heat out of 5.
Oh, don't mention that. Oh,
It's terrible. What a fucker, man.
again, I just imagine someone just slamming his head in the car door, and it just brings me great joy. It's like meditation, you know, when you just want to, you know, feel positive, feel warm thoughts, feel, you know, like the unbridled joy and catharsis of a right bastard getting his comeuppance. Right, my rating. I mean, you've basically covered all the points I was going to make. I mean, the show, like, it
Sorry.
is. No, that's fine. We've done this before to each other more times. Like, we're terrible for it. I absolutely 100% agree with you that the show is. I don't know how it's doing it because in theory, tackling like, let's take for example just the idea of transphobia. Like, you could do an entire show on that alone.
Yeah.
But this show is like done so many different topics and ideas, and it's covering them all under the umbrella of its own like central thesis of like, you know, emotional and mental violence against women on a societal and physical in some cases as well. I should add that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and the fact that it isn't a complete and utter clusterfuck is alone a miracle. But it's not
Man.
flawless.
No, I mean, you just saying that made me think like the scene where Karu was assaulted. Like, I mean, that's a fucking lot, right? And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people, yeah, I mean, oh, I blame no one for their reaction to that scene, whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Their emotional response.
Yeah, I mean that scene to me feels like it encapsulates a lot of how I feel about Wonder Egg. Where, from a narrative perspective, I'm personally glad it's in there because sometimes you need to present things as they are. And unlike, say, stuff like, I mean, I brought this before, like with Die Buster, where they put a rape scene in there for basically no good reason, as far as I'm concerned. The reason that that is in there is because in this show that is in Wonder Egg episode 10 is because again it feels like a very, I was going to say clinical, if that's the right word, expression of gendered violence. Like, you are a woman, and I'm going to prove it to you in the way that, you know, in this particular way that unfortunately often happens to women. You know, it feels like to make a point, really,
Yeah, it's like
more than any
if
sort of sex,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to
more
cut
than
you
any
off.
sort, more than any sort of like say sexual gratification. It is
Mm-hmm.
basically to put Kaoru in his place.
It's
Um,
stomach turning, you know, because he trusted the kendo master, and
yeah,
that
this
fucker, like, yeah, is just like, just imposing. It's like, no, you may not be woman because I do this, and it's like it feels authentic, like in terms of how fucked up someone might think. But that doesn't mean that it's automatically like this great thing to put in the show. Like, but as you
No,
say,
no.
like, you know, it's the awfulness, and to feel revulsed is like is the idea.
Yeah, exactly. And that, of course, also is why, consequently, I mean, like, you might say, well, of course, Karu was going to become pregnant, he was raped. But the thing is, again, we have to remember that all creative decisions are
Right.
the
Right.
decision of the author. And so, therefore, Karu only becomes pregnant because the author wants it to happen. And why did it want it to happen? Because, again, it's an extension of gendered violence,
Yes. Yes.
enforced pregnancy, abortion as a outcome of that as well.
Yeah.
It's all in there. And the thing is, as you are rightly pointing out, though, I can say why I think it's there, and I can admire the audacity of it. I am, and of course, be utterly revulsed by it.
Yeah.
Fucking appalling. It's disgusting. But that is merely my reaction to it. I cannot speak for other people on how they feel about it. It probably does hit very close to the bone for a lot of people. I mean, I'm a guy for a start. Like, never mind, like, what I was born as. I present as a guy. I have never had that kind of thing happen to me at all.
Yeah.
But there are women who, like, I mean, this happened. This is why, again, I said mentioned in the previous part about real life events as of late. There are women who literally are afraid to go out and do anything because for them, men are predatory animals. And as I've said before, objectively speaking, not true. But the objectivity is irrelevant here
Yeah.
because, of course, the perception is all that matters. So
Yeah.
not all men. You're right, but it's not the thing you should be saying. Doesn't it's not? It's actually is you're right, but you're not correct. Funnily enough.
Thank you, Shiro
Yeah.
Emiya.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeremy. So to get back on track, like I also just have to acknowledge again the thing that I admired about these episodes, which is they wove I into the story seamlessly throughout all of them, and advanced her own character in doing so. So that was really good. Like,
Yeah.
this show, even though it doesn't have enough time, is making us about as economical a use of time as it can do. It doesn't feel like any of it's wasted. I am gonna, in the end, with a big asterisk around this, because it's going to change depending on how the rest of the show plays out, much as my overall feeling on it will. I am, in the end, going to give this block of episodes 4.25 fit fat chocolate bars because there is knockoff Kit Kats. But the big asterisk around this also, of course, is just again as a reminder, that's my appraisal of it. And I take no authority in it. I take no I suppose I will never say someone who might say this episode or this sick episode, these episodes deeply offended me. I will never say you were
You're
wrong to feel that way.
Let me tell you how you should feel. Yeah.
No, it's not.
Also, like,
No.
I think with this show, almost more than any other show we've covered on our streaming series coverage, I feel like these ratings could retroactively change based on like how shit ends up. You know what I mean? It could something could happen that like recolors everything in this way that is bad and gross. Like, that could sort of ding it a little bit. I mean, I said before, I think that no matter if the plot itself kind of nosedives, like the character stories up to this point have been so good, I think the show will be a success. And I think that largely remains true. I do still think I feel that way pretty strongly about some of them in particular, some of the characters. But just thinking about everything that we've talked about today, I mean, I definitely could see how, with one stroke of a pen in the writer's room could change a lot about the preceding episodes and make them worse. I don't know. Do you agree? Do you feel what I'm?
Oh, well, the metaphor I used recently to describe this to a friend of mine was, if you've ever seen the Denzel Washington film Flight, which is actually not. No, no,
I've
seriously,
not seen
seriously,
it.
I'm going somewhere with this.
Okay.
So it's actually a film about self-destruction, self-loathing, pain, and alcoholism. But Denzel Washington's character is a pilot. I believe it was actually based on real events. And while flying a commercial airliner full of passengers, he is, by the way, I should point out, steaming pissed while doing this, but somehow he doesn't come across that way. He hides it. An engine fault occurs. He has to somehow land the plane. He does so by tilting upside down for several minutes. And then it's all falling apart, but he manages to land it. And I don't think anyone actually dies. There are injuries, but no one dies. And this to me feels like a metaphor for how I feel about Wonder Egg right now. It is this close to utter catastrophe,
Yeah.
and it's going to take the deftest of hands to bring it in for a smooth landing. And I'm praying that that's the case because
Yeah.
we need more media like this, in my opinion, that an intent at least that is not
The
afraid
approach.
to explore,
Mm-hmm.
to approach all of this, all these awful topics. I mean, it makes people can make the contemporary Persona references all they want, but Persona does not even have anywhere near the nerve that this show does for tackling its subject matter. Not even close. So, I think we do need more media like this. We need more media that is brave like this one. But I think we also, more specifically, need more media written by LGBT plus people that is given the same prominence as this, rather than letting, stories of women's pain be written by a man. And I'm not saying this renders Wonder Egg invalid, of course, but there's only so much, room for anime or fiction in general to exist in a wide commercial market, a widely available space, with the recognition that it should get. And overall, again, I feel like some parts of this show are fundamentally hindered by the fact that it's written from a guy's perspective. And that's not his fault, I should stress either, but I mean, it's unavoidable. I will also just add, though, as well, while Doc has just suddenly vanished, presumably because he's been told that someone's cancelling our podcast, like literally the cables are being unplugged right now. I will point this out. I again invite you to go seek out LGU plus criticisms, reviews, discussions, or even just talk with someone who is trans about this show, if you can. And of course, just to more widely consume the content of LGB plus people, LGB plus narratives, things like that. Because they are voices that are absolutely worth listening to, voices that will enrich your life. I mean, I'll speak for myself here. Like, as I said, guys, some of the most profound stories I've consumed in anime have been LGB plus ones. I've often felt more catered to because I don't want to buy into like what is often, given as a cis-het targeted media, which is often, well, stuff like redo of a healer, for example. Piece of shit. Like, I don't want to be a part of that particular media. I want media that is thoughtful, intelligent, emotionally mature, and affecting, and not violent, disgusting dog shit. So yeah, please. Oh, Doc's back.
And return.
So yeah, just to reiterate, if you've not already done so, please, for the love of God, go seek out LGBTQ plus like perspectives on the show and of things in general, and consume more LGBT. Like, vary up your diet. It will only benefit you, and it will sorely give the representation that LGBT plus people need. And otherwise, that's pretty much it from me for the show. Okay. And I'm all Wonder Egged out for a little while.
Okay, until for another couple weeks. I actually have two more thoughts that I thought of while I
went through. Man, go on.
Okay, so I think it's like just of a piece of what we were saying anyway when I was leaving. Just the show is like, it should be lauded in its like approach to tackle a lot of difficult topics, but like, maybe the execution, the way that it's doing it is just like not good, or at least
wonky.
Wonky, or just like, it just doesn't sit well. And I think for me, that is typified almost by the fact that like in this episode, Karu, as we pointed out, textually, unambiguously trans, says, I'm a trans boy, and the show is thumbs up. We validate this. This is like what you're supposed to think. This is the reality. Regardless of the fact that Karu has was AFAB, assigned female at birth, has capability to get pregnant, has a womb, and gets pregnant and everything like that. So the show is like so clinically detached. You could look at it and be like, the show is saying that manhood, womanhood is not a thing that is solely determined by biology. And that is a good thing. That is an idea that I think you and I both can absolutely get behind. It is it is scientific truth, not just like some sort of abstract idea. But like the way that it gets there is so messy and fraught, and use, rape as a storyline device that just, after a little while could feel played out in anime, especially. And so it's like, oh, like, did we need to take this path to get here? Kind of thing, you know what I mean? Not to say that it doesn't happen. You don't want to deny the reality of the pain and these situations, obviously, but I don't know, man. Just like for folks that see LGBT that are LGBTQIA plus and see people like them in anime or other media fall into these tropes, die tragically, are a punchline or whatever. A single piece of media is not at fault for that, but there's a cumulative effect over time of these same stories being told over and over again. And it's like, at some point you just have to like be like, all right, any media that does this, I'm coming for you. You're fucking like doing some shit that just needs to, we gotta improve on that. We gotta do better. We can do better. We gotta start one piece of media at a time. So I know it's not Wonder Egg's fault, but like you're part of it perpetuating some bullshit. You know what I mean? Or whatever kind of show. So anyway, just wanted to get those thoughts out there that I thought of.
Wonder Egg as a show, to me, particularly of episode 10, feels like it was capable of taking 2 steps forward, but only took 1. And that's still forward progress, but the capacity was there to go further. And that's my final thought on it.
That's a good way to end it. I agree.
Cool. All right then. Well, we're not quite done with the pod because we have a little bit of a palate cleanser, a bit of a side content. And we're going to go to the Warui Deshou Hall of Fame. All right. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, it's time for an actual musical sting. All right, so the Warui Deshou Hall of Fame. This is a segment that we haven't gotten to do in a little bit, but it's back because it's a stream of thought. And so here we go. So we pick characters, we pick moments, we pick poses, expressions, creators, settings, anything anime, manga, or adjacent to that to enshrine in our very own Hall of Fame. Up to this point, we have had Thorkel. I almost call him Thorfinn again because I have a dad brain that's riddled with holes. Thorkel punching a bear. We have the gunbuster robot pose. We have the surfing robot
Macross Forcer,
of the Macross Quarter from Frontier, and I believe that was the last one we did. So
yes,
without further ado, my second entry in the Warui Deshou Hall of Fame is from the late 90s, I believe 1998 anime Trigun. It is.
Yeah, my boy.
I don't know if you can see the stream, Shadon, but there's a picture of Wolfwood, Nicholas D. Wolfwood, riding his motorcycle.
Yeah.
And there's a particular thing on the back that is the actual entry into the Hall of Fame, and that is the big crucifix, the cross that he has behind him on the bike. It is taller than he is. It is wrapped up tightly in cloth and belted over with a number of belts that would make Soul Bad Guy jealous. And what is this thing? Well, I almost hate to spoil it if you haven't seen Trigun, but it is an unbelievably badass weapon. It is a large automatic gun. And he, rips... Go.
It's a missile launcher as well, don't forget that.
Oh, that's right, the other side, the short side of the cross. He can flip it over, and it's a missile launcher. But yeah, Wolfwood, when he's in a bit of a scrape, will pull off the cloth and reveal it as a giant metal gun. The long end of the cross is the machine gun barrel, and there's a kind of hole in the middle of the cross, but it has like a grip in the middle, so that's the grip he uses to hold the gun. And it is just a big ass gun, shaped like a cross that this motorcycle, this motorbike riding country preacher has. And it's incredible. It's an incredible weapon.
Yeah.
And in the English dub, one of my favorite moments is when he is catching a ride on a bus. And of course he can't, he's a preacher, so he has to bring his cross. And he tosses it to one of the movers to load onto the bus. And the mover's like, oh my God, this is so heavy. Like, what the fuck? What's up with this? And Wolfwood says, it's so heavy because it's so full of mercy. and that just always got me. But yeah.
It's also just a great metaphor for it, like part of his character arc, as I remember it, his character in general, in that his religion has literally been weaponized to deal with his pain, to mete out justice.
Yes.
It's not just, he is not simply waiting for God to smite his enemies, he'll do it himself. But God, you make me want to watch Trigun again now, because now I'm just thinking there's so many other great moments now.
We should. This is a show that when we were still doing the long form versions of the pod, I think it was my turn next after Yatterman Night, and Trigun was going to be the show. But
yeah,
we took a turn that changed the course of WG forever and went into these episodic reviews. So.
I'll just add, from my point of view, I completely 100% agree with your inclusion of that. If I were to pick anything from Trigun that would have gone in the Hall of Fame, it would have been the moment Meryl reveals that she is Derringer Meryl.
Yes.
Because that's the point in which I think, I got shot through the heart. I was like, yeah, that's it. Hey, this is peak. This is peak. It's such a badass moment.
So many tiny guns.
But I need to also point out, I think we will have to get around to discussing Trigun at some point, because Trigun isn't just simply a flashy, action, Wild West sci-fi anime. It's also got some, decent, mediations on the idea, for example, of nature versus nurture. Which is really interesting. And also, morality, at what point is it acceptable, if ever, to take a life? That kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutist morality put to the ultimate test.
Yes, there are certainly things that we could discuss at length, apart from just gushing about all the fun moments in it. And all the sad and tragic moments.
It's a tragedy, yeah. It's it is probably the anime that... I watched it in my formative years, I was 17 years old. It was probably the first TV show I watched that made me depressed, after I finished it. And I just really didn't do much of anything for probably 3 days, but kind of lay around and think about it, think about the ending and everything like that. And, it's it's definitely the show that made me, I was originally going to say, it primed me to be okay with the tonal shift. I mean, you grow up watching a show like this, and it makes a deep impression on you like this does. You're always going to be, I think, more okay with tonal shifts, because this show just has a giant one. And there are some people that cannot get over it at all because it is so
I mean,
stark.
El Diablo. That episode is literally a game changer for the show in many respects.
Yeah.
Holy moly! But God, like I mean, I'm also thinking like how even at the time I watched it, I felt rather critical of some of its moral lessons. I mean, I'm not going to get into it right now because we're obviously going to save this for the actual time we'll discuss it. Which I just want to point out that Vash does actually, through his moral absolutism, let several people die, and it's only when two of his friends are directly threatened that he actually intervenes. And that that doesn't make him a bad character. It just makes him a flawed person, as you might otherwise expect. And I imagine you and I will have a lot to discuss about that, but I just think, wow.
There's a lot. I mean, he's like definitely like, I mean, he almost has a religious sense of morality, but like, if you want to put it in secular philosophical terms, we'd have to get into what deontology is, like the deontological system of ethics versus a more kind of pragmatic utilitarian or rule utilitarian way to look at it. And deontology is really foreign, I think, to a lot of people, that especially people that didn't grow up religious. It can seem very fucking weird, but like I think that, and again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds in this, like you said, but I do think that we can absolutely agree that he's a flawed character, but there's something I think that's beautiful and noble about the character and his flawed nature. So yeah, that is where that is in a very, very broad sense where I sit on Vash. At least now, maybe I'll rewatch it and be like, that motherfucker.
To tie this all into a nice little bow and bring it back to Wolfwood's weapon, you mentioned, of course, that there's something almost religious about him. Well, he does win the final fight with Wolfgang's weapon. So all, eventually, like, he does show that religions can provide a strong sense of morality, but also sometimes you just gotta go Old Testament on motherfucker,
That's right.
Anyway, we'll leave the Hall of Fame there, but yeah, I 100% agree. Great weapon, fantastic. Look out for Trigun at some point in the future when we finally get around to talking about it, because now I just want to watch it again, because Trigun is great.
It's so good.
That's the end of the Hall of Fame. And that is also the end of our extended, double long, full fat Wonder Egg episode 7 through 10 discussion. So I think I'll suppose I'll get some stuff out of the way, get some housekeeping done, which is firstly to say thank you for listening, whether or not you joined us for the first part, whether you just came for the second, whether you're listening to this on the pod. However you're currently hearing my voice, and hopefully it's not, from the walls or whatever caught in your head. Hopefully I don't live there rent-free. Thank you very much for listening. I really, really appreciate you giving us the time to try and get our opinions across. I won't repeat what we've said at length before because there's no real need to, other than just to say that I absolutely do welcome people's opinions on this show and these particular block of episodes. If you feel differently than we did and you're willing to contact us in good faith, absolutely let us know. Find me at Shadon1010 on Twitter, Doc at the Soul Doctor, at Warui Deshou is our group account, of course.
YouTube comments, whatever.
Yeah, I'm not going to plug our Patreon because I'm going to start this as I ended by saying that I'd rather at the moment, given the fact that the show was delayed and it's clearly like consuming the time and energy of a lot of talented young animators, that you just give to the animator, new dormitory part or the new anime making projects, give your money to them instead. That's the way I feel about it. We'll plug our Patreon another time. You know where you can find if you do want to give money to us, but there are people who need it more than we do. And that's really about it. And lastly, but not leastly, again, please peruse the content and output of people other than ourselves, particularly those who are LGBT+, because their perspectives, I don't think you can have a complete perspective on this show without experiencing that from someone else of that group. I don't think it's possible.
Yeah.
And I certainly would encourage people to take my opinions as given and not look for any others. As I say, there's plenty of good material out there. I will again shout out Emily Rand's blog because she's providing all of the discussion of the flower language, stuff that I have no idea what otherwise it would mean. So invaluable commentary there. I would also very highly recommend you check out Vestnet's reviews of Wonder Egg because they are, I can't speak for who Vestnet is, but they are very well they're very well handled. They're very maturely handled. They treat the subject matter with the gravity it deserves. And I find them very, very enlightening.
Can I just
So
say
definitely do check them.
about Vestnet? Like, I am very pleased that that they have the platform they do on Anime News Network now, because like I like so many talented people that that are working there now and will work there in the future. I remember when Vestnet started as a blogger, and um, Vestnet was part of this blog called "Isn't It Electrifying," which also features the also talented, very talented Natasha, aka
Yeah.
Illogenes, who writes anime stuff for IGN, and has written for great pieces for Crunchyroll in the past as well. But but so yeah, Vestnet started as just one of us, a blogger, and kept chipping away, and now they are writing these Wonder Egg columns on ANN that get read by a bazillion people, and they deserve it because very insightful, good writer, you know. So kudos, big ups to you.
Big ups. And yeah, we will leave it there. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your patience as we've covered this subject matter. I hope we've done it even just a little bit of justice. But again, we'll invite people to talk to us about it. We'll be back for the finale when that comes around. I don't yet know if it's been confirmed if we have 2 episodes or 3 left because of the previous delay.
Right.
One would assume 3. We'll see.
Crossing my fingers.
We may also potentially have a guest joining us for that, but I'm confirming nothing at this time until we get concrete confirmation of that. But you can certainly expect me and Doc to be there regardless. And then that'll bring us to the end of Wonder Egg Priority. So on that note, ladies, gentlemen, MDs, thank you very much. Stay safe, take care of each other, look out for each other in these trying times. And as we occasionally, every now and again, say on the podcast, what we feel like it may be, embrace you, everyone, to the ends of the universe. Good night.
I have stopped.
I have stopped it.
Good stuff, man. I felt so precarious and vulnerable. So thank you for being vulnerable.
You and me both. You and me both. Jesus Christ. Anyway, it's out there. It's out.
It is. Yep, it's out there.
It's out there.